in there and doing your work last time. So now I know what we need to work on, which is just terrific. And so we're going to review that assignment. We're going to do a little practice in naming variables, and then we'll go over those alternate explanations again. Then we're going to do some work with operational definitions, which is really important for your overall project. We'll do correlations, then we'll finish the content that we started last time. We'll look at how to measure correlations in curvilinear relationships, outliers, spurious relationships. We'll just finish up that content. And then time permitting, we'll go into regression models, and we'll have a break at our normal time around halfway through our class. During operational definitions, you'll have a little time to work in a group because I'm going to assign you each to work on one operational definition after we go through it, and this will help you. And remember, this is our last week of content this way, because next week we start working with your own topics and your own individual assignments. There'll still be content, but it won't be quite like this anymore, because we're going to really focus on getting your projects going, your own research proposals. So let's get started. So variable pairs, I took pairs out of your own work. You did a really good job. So this will just be a review. Remember, we're working with correlations, which is defining the relationships between variables. So you guys had some good examples. I just pulled them forward here. So what we're going to do is we're just going to have a review of which direction you think these would be. And then I'm also going to ask you how strong you think it would be. And I'll tell you what I mean by that in a minute. So someone had this suggestion for the first variable, the minutes a person spends playing with their dog, and the second variable, the trust the dog has for the owner. And what I want you to do is, everyone needs to answer, please. Would you say this is a positive relationship? And remember, we don't mean good or bad. We mean the direction of the variables. Is it that if one increases, the other one also increases? Or if one increases, the other one decreases? If they both increase together, then that's a positive relationship. Or if they both decrease together, that's a positive relationship because they're together. If they go in opposite directions, it's a negative relationship. So everyone give an answer, please. Everyone who can, do it in the text and just indicate positive or negative. And then in a moment, Donovan, I'll ask you for your view on this because I know you can't type in. And I see Titania, Nicole, Talea, Lisa. All right. I didn't see, there's Katana. All right, I think we have everyone and everyone's correct. Donovan, what direction are we looking at? Sandralita, good, thank you.
Positive.
And that's right, that's a positive relationship. Now I want you to answer one more question. How strong do you think this would be? And by that, what I mean is, if you knew how many minutes someone spent playing with their dog, and you knew how we were going to measure trust, how much do you think you could predict trust based on how many minutes they played with their dog? And if you think that that would be really pretty good, you could really pretty accurately predict trust based on this, then you'd say that's a strong relationship. If you think it's going to be in the middle, then it's a moderate relationship. And if you think it's pretty weak, then you'd just say it's a weak relationship. And maybe you think it's nothing at all. So the words we're going to use are strong, moderate, and weak. And it is how well can you predict the one variable if you know the other variable. So now everyone indicate how strong, do you think this would be strong, moderate, or weak in terms of the relationship between two variables? Type in your answer, please. This is the question you're answering. How well can you predict variable 2 if you know variable 1? And if you think it's really good, you're going to say strong. And if you think it's going to be in the middle, it's moderate. And if you think it's not going to be that great, you'd need a lot more information to really make a good prediction, then you'd say weak. Everyone jump in there because there's not really a correct answer. We'll just talk about it. So let me see the words strong, moderate, or weak. And I'm going to type the question as. Thanks, Talea. I'm not getting answers. So let me hear, Donovan, do you have any thoughts on this? Thanks, Nicole. I see some moderates and a strong. What do you think, Donovan? Do you have a perspective on this? How well could you predict, Naomi, thank you. Nice to see you here. How well could you predict trust if you knew the minutes playing with the dog?
I think it's more of a moderate.
Okay. And does anyone?
Because it's like
Go ahead. Go ahead.
Because it's an animal and it's like unpredictable.
Okay. Yeah, and there's not really a right answer. I mean, we're just guessing. We don't have any data. But I might think along those lines too, because I think, well, gosh, it depends on how much trust the dog started with. Like if the dog was abused, you know, we don't know the history of the dog. So I would think maybe moderate. There's not a right answer. We're just thinking about these. Let's do number 2 then. We're going to answer the same 2 questions. This one was kind of cute. The minutes using a pencil and the length of the lead in that pencil. Interesting. And I think I'm going to make this a brand new pencil, just to make it a little more clear. This is a brand new pencil. Minutes using the pencil and the length of the lead in the pencil. So what is the direction of the relationship? Do they both increase and decrease together, or are they going in opposite directions? Thank you, Katana. Good. And remember, if they go in opposite directions, you say it's a negative relationship or an inverse relationship. Good. Sandralita. Okay. Anyone else wants to weigh in here? I'm seeing lots of negatives and everyone is correct. Thanks, Nicole. Now, what do you think? Is it strong, moderate, or weak? If you know exactly how many minutes are in that using that pencil, how well can you predict the length of the lead? Strong, moderate, or weak?
I think it's a strong.
Thanks. And a lot of you think strong. And I think so too. I mean, what variables might also make it not perfect? Maybe how much pressure someone uses, right? But I think it's going to be pretty strong too. Let's continue. Size of home and cost of home upkeep. And this time I want you to answer both questions at once. The direction of the relationship. Are both of these variables going in the same direction, which is positive, or are they going in the opposite direction? And how well do you think you could predict? Strong, moderate, weak, not at all? And type both in. So this time type in strong, type in direction and strength. And I'm somehow sending this only to one person. Let me send this to all of you. And I see Lisa's answer. Thanks, Lisa. Good, good, good. Donovan, you can weigh in at any time. And anyone else can weigh in with their voice too, if they wish to. And most of you all of you are saying positive, which is good. The size, the bigger the home gets, the more it costs. And most of you are saying strong, which is probably probably pretty good. I mean, I guess it would depend on how much the people care about the house. You know, maybe if they're renting it out or something, they don't care about it. They don't spend much on upkeep, but you're still going to have to heat it. And, you know, I think it's going to be pretty strong too, and it's positive. Next item, age. This is human beings, age and energy level. Strength and direction. Thanks, Lisa. And I see everyone who's weighed in so far, Donovan, I don't know if you agree, is saying negative and moderate. And I think that's probably pretty good. Could anyone name any other factor that you think might come into play here? Like, what other factors besides age might impact energy level?
Would be their health.
All right, overall health could be a factor that impacts it. That's why it's not a perfect relationship. Let's do another one. I actually have 10 here, but I don't think we'll do all of them. The volume of noise in a study area and ability to concentrate on studying. And again, direction and strength. Whoops, I meant to write strength there and I guess it got deleted. Good, you guys. I'm seeing different. Everyone's saying negative, and I agree. As the noise goes up, concentration goes down. And I see a variety of predictive factors. Some of you say moderate, some say weak. I think I saw a strong. And I think this individuals might guess on this based on their own personal response to noise. So nice job, everyone. You guys are really strong with these concepts. Let's just do a couple more here. Oh, I see. Here they are. How about pair 6, credit rating and timely bill payment, direction and strength? Your credit rating, how good you are with your credit, and how often you pay your bills on time. Positive and strong, I'm seeing from you guys. Positive, moderate, good, good. And yeah, timely bill payment plays a big role in your credit rating, doesn't it? They also have some, that means the more you pay your bills on time, the higher your credit rating gets. And there are other factors they consider, like what your debt ratio is and things like that. So it's not perfect, but it's going to play a strong role. I agree. And let's see here. Let's go down to alcohol consumption and life expectancy. And let's hear direction and strength on this. Nice to have you here, Jeanette. So direction and strength on alcohol consumption and life expectancy. And I think we're talking about volume of alcohol consumed. Talea, thank you. Huh, interesting, Lisa. Lisa wrote that it's moderate and negative, meaning that the more alcohol, the less life expectancy. And then she adds the caveat that says, but if it's consumed just a little, maybe it could be strong and positive, or probably maybe moderate and positive. Yeah, so this is an example that we'll come back to because there could be a curvilinear relationship. We'll talk about this more later. Lisa, if I forget, jump in and remind me, because this is important to understand. There is some evidence, it's always questioned, but there's some evidence that drinking a small amount of alcohol, like a glass of wine each day, provides some benefits to health. And we'll talk more about that later. That research is often controversial. We generally think of increased alcohol consumption as negatively impacting life expectancy. All right, so let's call this, and now let's go to a couple of cautions. So in naming your variables, there are some things that we can learn. So make sure that your variables are named neutrally. A variable is just something that varies among individuals. It doesn't have a direction. It doesn't have anything besides that. It's just the aspect of this characteristic that varies. So instead of writing variable 1, older people, variable 2, less energy, your variables would just be age and energy level. So I didn't put a lot of examples here, but I did pull a couple more out of your own work. So let's see what this one says. I think this person identifies a good positive relationship, practicing for hours on painting skills, and then increases better artwork. So I think this person is correct in terms of these two factors varying in the same direction. But how could we state this in a way that just names the variable instead of having this direction? Okay, Lisa says hours and artwork. Lisa, let me ask you, hours of what? Of painting. So painting hours, and maybe instead of just saying artwork, could we be any more specific about that? I'm wondering. Could we even just change it to say art ability? Yeah, so the skills are the variable. Yeah, so I think that hours of painting practice would lead to better painting skills. So we would put painting practice as variable 1 and painting skill as variable 2. And so let's just indicate that here by, let me exit out and I'll type it in. Well, actually, I can use my pen today. Hang on. It's going to take me out. All right, let me go back in. So we might just say, instead of the way it's written here, we might say practice hours, and maybe we'd write painting practice hours, and then we would write art skills or painting skills. So that would be a better way to name these variables. How about this? This is another, I think this person is suggesting, this person wrote it out, that if you're working in a cleans environment, you're going to be able to focus better. So she's describing accurately, or he, a positive relationship. As the room gets cleaner, the focus gets better. That's what she's hypothesizing, which I think is a good hypothesis. But how could we state this in a neutral way? And let me see if we could have everyone weigh in. So we just need to, what is the variable indicated for variable 1? We need to state it in a noun form. Like, what are we going to be measuring in variable 1? I think I like the word, I like cleanliness. I like organization. Yeah, so let's write room, just for the sake of choosing one. Let's write room cleanliness. What could we put in for variable 2? We have a direction there that we shouldn't have. What could we put in so that we don't have this word better? We could just put focus. Very good. Let's assume we have focus, and in the next one, we'll see that we'll probably want to clarify it a bit more, but let's put, let's just leave it alone for now, focus. Let's assume we have a good way to measure focus. So what we've done in the first one is we've gotten rid of these 2 directional words. to make it neutral. We also clarified what we're measuring, art skills. In this one, we just tidied this up a little bit. We just made it into a simple word, practice hours. And so we got rid of sort of that lengthy description. So let's go on and look for one more aspect of variables. So we want to name our variables measurably. Like when we name a variable, we should come away with something that we think we can measure. And do I not have an example here? Well, I think this example is still apt, but I should have put a new example down. I put a bunch of them into your homework assignment this week. But let's look at this one again. Last time we got rid of these two words, and in our cleanup, we did change older people to age. So the unit of measurement is years, right? That's what we're going to be measuring. That's an easy to measure. And then energy level, we still don't know what we're exactly measuring there, but let's just say scores on self-report of energy. So we're going to just ask these people about their energy level, and their scores are going to be what we're counting. So let's look at a couple of other examples. This is one that we'll do together as another example. The healthier you eat, the more weight you lose. So this person is positing a negative relationship that healthy increase in healthy eating corresponds with decrease in weight. So weight, I think we could just say, we'd get rid of that word and we could just say weight, and we know we're going to measure it in pounds or kilograms. How about this first one? We could say, instead of the healthier you eat, because how are we going to measure this? We could say the number, I'll use the pound sign for number, of healthy foods eaten per 24-hour period, right, per day. We could do something like that, or nutrients. I see healthy diet, calories maybe. So I don't know exactly what this person is positing. I think maybe she's saying not having junk food. Maybe that's how she's thinking about healthy foods. So she would have to define healthy foods. But what I'm going to say is we're going to count the healthy foods. So we're going to get a number of how many healthy, maybe the variety of healthy foods we eat during a day. This would need more careful defining here. Yeah, nutrients. Donovan, I haven't heard from you in a bit. Do you have, well, let's go on to the next one. Maybe we'll hear from you. Here's another variable pair. I think this is a good positive correlation. The more face masks worn during COVID-19, exposure to COVID-19 decreases. So first off, we can get rid of the directional word in variable 1 and variable 2. What's the directional word that we should get rid of so that variable 1 is neutral?
More.
Let's get rid of more. Let's just get rid of the more. All right. What's the directional word in variable 2?
Decreases.
Decreases. So we'll get rid of both of those. Now, how could we possibly measure it? Are we thinking about maybe the number of minutes per day? Or maybe the proportion of time in public during which a face mask is worn? Can anyone give a shot at I'll use this term, operationalizing us, giving us something to count or measure or time, or what could we possibly count in this? Let me type the question. I'm going to send this out to everyone if I can find that. So the question is this: how could we quantify face mask. Okay, I see someone wrote face mask worn while in public, and I think we're on the right idea there, but I still don't know what I'm counting. What is it that I'm counting? Am I counting like the times a person wears a face mask up against the times they go out in public? I mean, if they don't ever go out in public, they don't need a face mask. It's not going to help them. So how am I going to, let's think about this. How can we quantify this? Put a number to it.
Probably like the number of minutes a mask is worn in public decreases the spread of COVID.
Okay, I think we're along the right start. The number of minutes a mask is worn in public, but here's the caveat or the weakness. Yeah. So what if one person is in public for 8 hours and wears a mask for 2 hours of that time, and the next person is out in public for 2 hours and wears that mask for 2 hours of the time? Thanks, Nicole. What are we going to do about that? So if we just time it, really the first person who was out there for 8 hours but wore the mask for only 2 hours is at greater risk than the other person who was out there for 2 hours and wore the mask for the entire time. What do you think? Okay, the number of times we wore a face mask while interacting with others. So we'd be counting a frequency. 1 time you went to the store and wore it, 2 times, 3 times, 4 times. Okay, I think that could work. You would be counting, but I think we'd have to use a proportion. I think we would just end up having to use a proportion saying like the proportion of times a person wore a mask when out in public. And then we'd be getting a more accurate measure. So I'm going to write that word, the proportion of minutes in public during which a mask was worn. And I like Lisa suggested interacting with others. You know, that might even be more, it might even be more important. I don't know. Let's just leave it like this for now. And whoever the researcher is here, I'll have to figure this out. And then exposure to COVID-19, that's a tough one too. Maybe we would be measuring, say we're going to give them a COVID test each week or something like that. And we're going to measure, I guess we just have a yes, no answer, positive, maybe negative COVID test results. Negative COVID test results. Go ahead, Donovan.
I actually have a question about the word proportion. Is it more like a, I'm not too sure. I'm trying to understand what that means. Is the proportion, is it sort of like a duration of like maybe a 8-hour shift or something like that?
Yeah.
Is it a duration?
It's a percentage. So let's say they were out for 8 hours. So if we had 8 hours in public,
Mhm.
and they wore a mask for 2 of those hours, 2 hours with a mask, then we'd take 2, divide by 8, and we would get 0.25 or 25%.
Okay.
So that person would get a score of 0.25 or 25%. The person who was out in public for 2 hours and wore their mask for all 2 hours would get a 100% because they wore it for the whole time. Does that make more sense? I hope. Let's look at one more. This one might be easier to do. Cigarette smoking and years of life. I think years of life is pretty clear, but what could we do with cigarette smoking? What exactly are we going to be counting? That's all I want to know.
The number of cigarette intake.
Okay, number of cigarettes smoked in what time frame?
Maybe per day.
All right, number of cigarettes per day. That's very good. All right, and someone could change it. Maybe they're interested in having it counted differently, but that's the idea. All right, probably average number of cigarettes per day, something like that. All right, so we'll talk a little more about this later when we talk about operational variables, but let's go on and go to what? This stuff. This was hard. I took these are actual studies. These are actual headlines. So let's just do these together. It's not always as easy as we'd like it to be. So first off, what are the variables in this headline? What's one of the two variables?
Sincere smile.
All right, I think I agree. Thank you for stepping in. So I think one of the variables is sincere smiling. What's the other variable?
Longevity.
Yeah, they wrote it as longevity. We could put it as years of life if we wanted to be a little more clear with that measurable aspect. I wouldn't mark it wrong if you put longevity though. That's pretty clear too. Well, let's just indicate for sure we're talking about years of life. All right, so the reason I did this is because these headlines are so often misleading. So that's what I wrote here. The headline is misleading because it describes only one possible direction for the relationship. It has this word promotes, which implies a causal relationship. Causal. It's suggesting that smiling causes, in some ways, it's suggesting that smiling causes you to live longer. So this is what we're looking at here. We're trying to challenge this. So we're measuring years of life and we're comparing it with the number of times presumably a person gives sincere smiles. And you know, it could be that factor A or variable A or variable one. Let me use the exact terminology that I have there. Let's use variable one. It could be that variable one, which is sincere smiling, causes, and I do this arrow to mean a cause. It causes variable two. I'll just write V2, which is longevity. That could be. When we reverse it, and that maybe it has to do with, maybe the mediating factor is like some sort of hormone that's produced when we smile sincerely. Because we warm our hearts, we express maybe gratitude, love, affection, and those emotions cause reduced stress for us. Maybe it's something like that. But when we have a correlation, the reverse could also be true. It could be that longevity or years of life cause sincere smiling. Is this possible? Is this plausible? I could build a case for it. I could say it is plausible. And plausible means that it's like believable. It makes sense. I think I could build a case for it to make sense by saying that, well, maybe people just get happier and less self-conscious as they get older. And so sincere smiling increases because of years of life. Years of life cause people to give more sincere smiles because they're maybe less caught up in getting ahead and less worried about finding a good job and more relaxed and more able to show love and affection. And so they just smile more because they're older. So it could be the reverse. Now I want to ask you all of this. Think about this. Does this make sense to you? Everyone answer. Does that reverse explanation that I offered, does that make sense? Everyone kind of give me an answer for that reverse one, because this one was a little tricky. Oops. Thanks to a couple of you who answered, and let me pull that chat back up. All right, good. So we're not, remember, if we have a positive relationship, both go up or both go down. So they go up and down together, they vary together. So we don't have to worry about whether the direction that we're positing, we know they're going to vary together. What we're trying to explain is reversing the variables. And then is there some other variable, a third variable that's unknown? I'll just put a question mark, that causes variable 1, sincere smiling, and also at the same time could cause variable 2, long life, longevity, years of age. Can we think of anything like that? What would cause a person both to have more years, to be longer life, to have a greater age, and to give more sincere smiles? Okay, overall health or happiness. If a person is overall healthy, maybe they both smile more because they're more relaxed and they live longer. I like that answer. And someone else said happiness. People do tend to have a set point for happiness. And so maybe happier people who are just by nature happier smile more sincerely and live longer. Okay. So we can just stay with those. Laughter, exercise. Exercise, I like that. Exercise promotes those good feelings. These are all third variables. Laughter.
All their teeth.
What'd you say?
I said, what about like all their teeth?
Teeth?
Yeah. If they continue to have all their teeth.
Oh, yeah. Someone who has dental problems wouldn't smile as much. Okay, well, if you take, let's see, I think we talk about this in social psych, probably other classes too, but sincere smiling is actually a smile in your eyes, like it's detectable through the wrinkles in the side of your eyes. And in, I think that's what they mean with sincere smiling. So I wonder if you could do that without showing your teeth, but otherwise you posit a good variable. Or Lisa says clean teeth. Yeah, maybe so. Maybe you're more self-conscious about your smiling if your teeth aren't good or if you haven't brushed. And then meditation. Yeah, people who meditate dig into that deep loving part of themselves. And it also promotes long life. And I think that's another plausible third variable. So that would be, all of those would be good answers. But remember, you guys don't have to do this problem over, but because I'm going to put more problems like, I have more problems like this on your next homework. Okay, this one was tricky. I think the reason that I was having trouble understanding some of your answers is because we didn't define the variables well. So sexism pays, this is the actual headline. Men who hold traditional views of women earn more money. What's one of the variables here?
Sexism?
Yeah, if we call, and how do we do, and so, yeah. So in a way, we're talking about sexism, but that's in, whoops, that's a,
Probably gender role.
yeah. What we're actually looking at is more like sexism, or we might say traditional views of women. So we might say, see, this was a hard one for me to give you, which is why I'm not going to ask you to do it over. But so traditional views of women, that's what we're really looking at. Sexism might be a good word. The extent to which views are traditional extent to which views of women are traditional, I think might be a good way. To which views, let me see, I think there's got to be a better way of looking at it. So we're looking at men. This study includes only men. And they found that the men who look at women as being better staying home and maybe not good at math and kind of hold a lot of stereotypes about the gender roles that women have historically taken, that those men also earn more money. So the more their views are traditional, the more money they earn. So let's just put income for the variable 2. That one's nice and easy. And for variable 1, let's indicate traditional, I keep trying to turn that into a different form. Traditionality of views of women. I think we could just put sexism. I think we'll just do that. Sexist views of women or traditional views of women. Traditionality. I'll put both. Or traditionality, I'm going to invent a word, of views of women. So now that we've defined these, it gets less muddy because I think some people were confusing that women were earning the more money, but it's not true. This right here, all of this is sort of like the variable 1. So now I chose this one because I thought it was kind of an interesting third variable. So this was a study someone conducted. They took as much information about how men view women. They choose men, and then they asked them about their perspectives on women. And they asked them how much their income was. And then they found that the more traditional the views, the more money the men made. All right. Is it possible that there is an expected cause effect that variable 1, the traditionality of their views, and let's just put traditionality of views of women, my invented word, could lead to higher income. And it might be mediated by, let's say, the sense of this same man as provider. He might have more of a sense of himself as provider because he looks at women as more dependent, more sense of importance in being a good provider. That could be the mediating factor of his provider role. Could it be that the reverse is also true, that variable 2, income, could cause men to have more traditional views of women? I'm just going to put variable 1, and I'm going to just write sexism for the sake of not having to write so much when I'm in front of everyone. Could we explain that at all? Is this possible? Is there some way that we might think of increases in income contributing to increases in sexism or traditional views of women? Could we, is it plausible? That's what we're asking. And if so, could we explain how? The last message I see says clean teeth. So let me hear some thoughts on this. Is it in any way plausible? Could you build a case that somehow higher men, for a male population, that having a higher income could lead them to be more sexist? How could that be? What would mediate that or explain that? How could that be?
I think it would be just more like more like an encouraging saying for that will promote more men to like want to have that kind of income. So they have that kind of view. I don't know.
Well, let me see. Okay, let's consider that. I see the job title along with the amount of money will make them look down on women. All right, Lisa, I think that is a good explanation for the expected cause effect, or what's offered in the headline. They get kind of big on themselves with their job, and so they. Oh, wait a minute. No, I think you did state it right. They get big on themselves for their jobs, so they look down on women. Yeah, Lisa, that's a very good explanation. And sorry that at first I misthought it. Another thing that I think of is, all right, if you have a traditional view of women, what's that woman doing during her day? Is she going out to work or staying home?
Staying home.
She's staying home. Can a family that doesn't have much income afford to have a woman stay at home?
Oh, okay. Yeah. No.
No. So it might be that having a higher income allows them to hold more traditional views of women because they have the luxury of having one of the adults stay home. So
Right.
does that make sense, people, that reverse cause effect explanation? The mediating factor could be what Lisa suggested, which is ego associated with job title, or another mediating factor could be just having the resources to allow someone to stay home. All right, so let's look at a third variable. Whoops, a third variable, some unknown factor. I think I might have just identified a third variable here. An unknown factor that both causes variable 1, sexism, and variable 2, income. So we might be thinking about it as higher sexism, higher income, or might be causing people to be less sexist and also have lower income. It's tricky. Any ideas? What do you picture when you think of a guy who's more, I'm using this word loosely, but he's holding traditional views of women. Remember, I'm just writing this word because it's easier to write down. Family relationship. Titania, can you add anything to your thoughts on that?
I think of the environment he was raised in, so
Okay.
how his mom and father are, and maybe what their thoughts are about taking care of a family.
Okay. And how would that family relationship also cause variable 2, income? Cause the income to be higher or lower? So if it's causing high sexism, how could it also cause high income?
Based on pushing the child to school or
Okay.
achieving higher income.
Okay, so being raised, it could be, so being raised in a sexist family. So what we assume, and I'm using that word loosely. I don't think or believe that all men who hold traditional views are sexist. So forgive the word it's for want of a better word. Let's just put traditionalists. In fact, I'm going to change it right now. Traditionalists. So this kind of family might first always push sons to be providers, making them take that provider role very seriously. And they might push differently on the daughters in their family. So they might be imbuing these men both with their sense of responsibility as provider and with a sense that women should not be providers, something like that. So I think that's a really good answer, Titania. I'm thinking of men who are low in their traditional views and some factor that would cause them to have less traditional views and also lower income. And all I was really coming up with was maybe like
Maybe
PhDs.
men that choose not to be married.
Okay, being single. And you
Yeah.
think that might contribute to greater sexism and greater income, or lower sexism and lower income? How can you think that through a little more for us?
I would say like single men tend to not hold a, let me see, like single men, they don't hold a title to being married. And you know how like traditionally a married couple, a man has to go out and work. And so as being single, he's not held up to an expectation. So
Okay,
it probably bring down the income.
bring down the income. You know, I think you could build a case, Donovan, but we'd have to think through it pretty carefully. Like, how would relationship status both at the same time cause a person to be higher or lower in sexism, and at the same time to be higher or lower in income? I'd have to think through it a little bit.
Yeah.
And then I see a low self-esteem suggestion. Lisa, do you want to elaborate on what you're thinking with low self-esteem as a possible third variable? How would it cause, I mean, do you want to? So men with low self-esteem might be higher. I don't know. I could see it going both ways. I could see men who are high in self-esteem being kind of traditionalists and have higher income. Do I see the reverse? Could it lower self-esteem contribute to less traditional views of women and lower income? I mean, maybe. Again, we'd have to build a case, I think, Lisa. Do you want to talk about it at all, or should we move on? Okay. Oh, men who have oh, interesting. She suggests, in case you can't see, men who have lower self-esteem would drive the women to become more independent. So the views on sexism would be lower and the income would be lower. The converse of that, the reverse of that, men who have higher self-esteem would drive the women to become more dependent. Huh, that's interesting, Lisa. I think you maybe built your case. We'll have to, anytime we would do this seriously, we'd have to find a research foundation for our little theories, but we're just speculating now. All right, this is the last one we did. Loud bar equals more beer. This actually, this headline really isn't that bad. It's not really implying a causal relationship. It's saying they're kind of equal. They might have reversed them, but let's tease it out anyhow and see these third explanations. What is the variable one? State it in the right way. State it neutrally and state it measurably. Something to do with the sound in a bar, if we want to use that one. Talea, don't worry about that last problem. Let's make sense of it in this one. That last one was really tricky.
Noise volume.
Okay, noise volume in bar. Good. We want it to be really specific. We could say measured in decibels, but noise volume in bar. And variable two, how are we going to measure beer? What's beer? Ounces,
Mhm.
pints, pints of beer consumed.
40s.
What'd you say?
I think.
Okay. See if this one makes sense, everyone. Expected cause effect. Most of you did pretty well with this, actually. How could it be that variable one, the volume of noise, causes variable two, beer consumption? I could say that. So what we're looking at is how could it be? What's plausible here? I would offer that maybe it's so loud that you can't even talk, so all you do is drink. I don't know. What do you think? Is that a plausible explanation?
Yeah.
Okay. So someone suggests the more people there are in the bar, the louder it gets. Yeah. Yeah, right. So it's louder because there are more people and that means more beer. So here's where our operational definition is important. Are we looking at beer consumed per person, as I was assuming? Or are we looking at, as I think Lisa was suggesting, more consumed per what is sold in the restaurant, in the bar? Right? So this is where our definition. So I was looking at per person, more beer per person, but Lisa was thinking more beer per bar. So that's why these operational definitions are so important. Anyhow, either way, we have good explanations how the loud noise could contribute to more beer on either way of defining it. How about the reverse? Variable 2, beer consumption causes variable 1, noise. I could posit that people, when they drink more beer, become less inhibited and talk louder because they're less inhibited. I could say that's plausible, and I might explain it in the way I just said. Does anyone else have any different explanation? Okay, I want to hear from everyone. Does that, I'm going to write it in the chat. Does it make sense that that beer increases in beer consumption lead to increases in the extent to which people talk loudly, or the reverse cause effect relationship? Excuse any spelling typos in here. Does it make sense? So I'd like to hear from everyone just so I know that this is kind of not still really muddy. So this is the reverse cause effect. Beer consumption, increases in beer consumption cause increases in noise. So far, I don't see any responses.
I would agree because the more you drink, the more drunk you get and the louder you get.
Okay, Katana, thanks for jumping in there. It makes sense to you. So reverse sound effect sounds clear. Yeah, Jeanette. Yeah, there would be individual differences for sure. And all we're talking about are group data. That's one thing to be really clear on in a correlation is we're just looking at group data. So on average, people might talk louder if they drink more beer. Words get slurred, okay. The other variable that makes noise in a bar would be like game playing and like music. And maybe, you know, somehow the music gets turned up, you know, I don't know, we'd have to build a case, but that's another possible plausible explanation. I still didn't hear from everyone who's here, and I wish I knew that you guys felt comfortable with this because you have to do it on your homework. I'll ask for questions in a minute. Let's think of a third variable, an unknown third variable that both causes noise in a bar and beer consumption. Lisa says happy hour. Yeah, I think that could be the timing of the measure. It could be the happy hour, people, happy to get off work. Maybe it's a post-game, maybe the event is what we would say as a third variable, and maybe people just got out of a game that they won or something, or a fight happening, or a birthday. So a fight might definitely cause an increase in noise. And do you think, Nicole, it would also cause an increase in beer consumption? Yeah, I think it might too. Fight would give all that testosterone. That's what happens when we're exposed to violence like that. Yeah, so a stressful, go ahead.
I was thinking more like on the lines of the bartender and how he feels more excitement through the loudness to serve more beers quickly or faster.
Okay, sure. The noise, it's getting louder and the bartender is just moving more quickly. It's noisy. He can't chat with anyone. He's just pouring the beer. Okay. Getting along with the crowd, stressful days at work. I think that we could say if it's a Friday after work, we might have people unwinding from stress. So the variable would be like the day of the week. So happy hour, or a Friday after work, after all the stress of the work week. We don't want to consider just individual variables, like an individual, but we could consider like a celebration of some sort, like a birthday celebration or something like that. Wow. I just saw that my words are getting transcribed and I have no idea how I did it. It's magic. And the team in the finale event. Okay. So you guys, let me ask you. This is kind of creepy.
Are you consuming beer?
I'm not. I might need to. No, I'm just joking. So that's so weird. So anyhow, I'm going to try to ignore that and continue on. But what I want to know is, you guys are going to have some of these on your homework. And do you think you're going to be able to do this? I have it laid out just like this. List of variables, and then do the expected, the reverse, and posit a third variable. I hope you can do this. If you don't, just let me know at some point here so I can give you some more help. All right. We can still get that in. So this is where we're going to go next. We're going to go to these operational definitions and consider this. This is one that someone had, and it was a good one. Fighting with siblings and getting along. They're positing an inverse relationship. More you fight with siblings, the less you get along. We could predict how well you get along with your siblings if we know how often you fight with your siblings. But this is my question. What are we going to be counting? What are we going to be measuring? What qualifies as a fight? How are we going to measure getting along? How are we going to actually gather these data? And this person didn't need to explain all that. This person had a really good proposal. This is a good inverse relationship. This is a very good example. But now if we were actually going to test this hypothesis, we would have to operationalize these variables. We're going to have to make these variables in some way be measurable, quantifiable, observable, objective. And that's what we're going to talk about just a little bit next. And so what we're talking about are operational definitions. And all that is a description of some variable in terms of the operations by which it could be observed and measured. So how could we observe and measure it? What procedure might we use to measure the variable? What actions might we have to do to measure the variable? What process is going to be in place? What are we going to be measuring? So an operational definition is something that allows you to actually research the subject. So that person may have a perfectly valid hypothesis. The more fights you have with the siblings, the less well you get along. it's not a testable hypothesis until he or she makes some operational definition and tells us, okay, what does a fight look like? How are we going to measure fights? How are we going to do this? So the example, this is the APA definition. I just copied this from the APA site. I should put this is APA. And the operational definition of anxiety could be measured in terms of a test score, like a self-report sort of test score. Maybe that's how we're going to measure it. Or maybe we're going to measure anxiety by whether the person stays in a situation or leaves the situation. And maybe what we'll be counting is number of minutes until withdrawal, until they leave the situation. Or maybe we're going to measure it physiologically, activation of the sympathetic nervous system. Maybe we're going to measure skin conductance. So in some way, we have to define how we're going to measure anxiety. And when we do that, we're doing something to put it in a verb form. This is a real word, operationalize. We're operationalizing our variable. And you're going to be doing this when you do your own proposals. So I'm just giving you like an overview of this right now, but we'll be working with this more. Now, sometimes, in fact, very often in psychology, we have to measure a construct. And I'm going to talk to you about this on the next slide. So typically, we have self-report measures. We can have behavioral measures. We can have physiological measures. Lots of different ways we can measure things. But we're usually measuring what we call constructs, which are, if I can get my slide forward here. Yeah, I really have a weird thing happening here. There it is. So a construct is, so this is sort of a loose definition. It's a skill, attribute, ability based on one or more established theories, but they're not observable. A lot of what we measure in psychology are in fact constructs. So what it is we have something like the example here, smartness or intelligence. We measure it all the time, don't we? Intelligence. We put numbers to it all the time, but what is it? Can we touch it? Can we feel it? Can we look at someone and see it? Can we put a thermometer in someone's mouth and get a measure of intelligence? We can't. It's a construct. It is just an idea that we in psychology have deemed important. Introversion or extroversion, construct. What is it? We can't see it. We can infer it by things that by things a person does. We can ask someone, ask for self-report, but we can't observe it. We can't measure it. Well, we have our proxy measures. How about, what's another example of a construct? Something that we use to describe people, a variable, but something that cannot be directly observed or measured, that we have to ask someone about. We can't know it just by looking. We can know someone's eye color by looking. We can know someone's height, their weight. We can measure those.
Maybe their fear.
Fear is a construct. What is it? It's some behaviors, like maybe running away or gasping or putting a fearful expression on your face. It can be measured probably physiologically. We see sympathetic nervous system activation, but it's just a construct. It is a label that we put on a cluster of like responses. Another construct, fear is a construct. What's another? Let's have type one in and Another construct. I'm going to type that out for you so you can see what I'm asking you. Fear we have intelligence, anger. Anger is a construct. These are both states. Anxiety is a construct, another state. So all of these are states, and what I mean by this are they're impermanent. They're temporary states of being. Someone is not always in fear. They're not always angry. They're not always anxious. These are emotional states that come and go. We also have emotional traits that are thought to be more enduring, like introversion, extroversion, overall level of aggressiveness, tendency to anger is more of a trait, like how likely you are to get angry. So these right here are states. We also have traits. And of course, traits are our physical characteristics, but also we might consider things like intelligence, which we consider to be somewhat more stable. Introversion, somewhat more stable. Sensation seeking is a trait that tends to be stable. There's a trait called Machiavellianism. If you've ever read that old test, Machiavellianism, which is like, how pragmatic are you in getting what you want? It's like based on a book that teaches you how to get and maintain power through like psychological means, like how do you get and gain power over people? Machiavellianism. Need for control is a trait, a construct. How much do you need to be in control of things? Agreeableness is a trait, but none of these things are directly observable. We ask someone, we can do a little inventory, we can look at behaviors and infer how agreeable someone is, but they're not directly measurable. That's what we mean by construct. What questions do you have about the concept of a construct in psychology? Level of confidence is a trait, is a construct. Good. What questions? Okay, so most of you, many of you are going to be working with these constructs in your proposal. And when you do so, you can usually, if we're not going to do physiological measures, usually we measure through an inventory or through a scale of some sort, or through behavioral observation. I'm going to give you an example. So the example is aggression. So someone has a study of something that they think is going to either relate to aggression or is going to cause aggression, cause increases in aggression. And so how are they going to measure aggression? And so there's a couple of ways they can do it. One is they can do self-report. After they expose someone to a stimulus, they can ask them to take a good validated measure of aggression. I'm going to show you this one. I think I'm going to show you this one. All right, so this is a link to, this is the Addiction Resource Center, but they have the aggression questionnaire. This is a valid questionnaire that would measure 4 components of aggression. By valid, we mean that someone has taken the time to develop and test the survey to make sure it's really measuring aggression. And so it's called a scale or an inventory. And in this case, it has 29 items. And it measures physical aggression. It measures verbal aggression. It measures anger, and it measures hostility. So if you were going to do a study and you were interested in knowing whether what you exposed people to caused them to be more aggressive or to feel more aggressive, you might give them your stimulus and then use this valid scale to measure it. So we'll be working more with this. And what you would get, I'll just show you what these items look like. This would be an excellent choice. So it looks, if someone took this, you would measure a scale that looked like this, and it would report like this particular person had lower scores in hostility, moderate scores in indirect aggression, but high scores in verbal aggression, somewhat higher scores in total aggression, moderate scores in anger. So that's the kind of profile you'd get. And your people that you were testing would be like, say, choosing responses from here on a 7-point Likert scale. And an example is for physical aggression, I may hit someone if he or she provokes me. To how much is that completely like you or not at all like you, or how much is it like you? The verbal aggression might say something like this: I can't help getting into arguments when people disagree with me. Is that very much like you or not so much like you? Or for anger, I flare up quickly, but get over it quickly. Is that a lot like you or not at all like you? And hostility, I do not trust strangers who are too friendly. How much is that like you? All right. So this is the kind of idea of if you were to choose to use a scale to measure aggression. Another way would be to do a behavioral measure. And that would be, you'd actually be asking your participants to do something that would be a proxy measure for aggression. And one thing to think about, you'd think, okay, we're measuring aggression. So should we measure whether our participant beats up their opponent? No, of course not. We can't put any of our participants in a position where we want them to cause violence. Instead, we're going to use this proxy measure, and we're going to measure the duration in seconds and the volume of a sound blast administered to an opponent. So we're going to say that administering the sound to an opponent is an aggressive move, and that's what we're going to quant when we measure aggression. And maybe we'll do both. We'll both ask them to please take this inventory, and we'll give them an opportunity to blast their opponent with a sound in seconds and with a certain volume, but there won't really be an opponent there who's getting hurt. But ostensibly, we'll give them the chance to actually take that aggressive action with assuring that no one will be hurt. So this is what we were talking about. So if we operationalize the variables, we're going to define how the variable will be measured and what the unit of measurement will be, like what's going to be counted, or what will the numbers we gather actually represent. Now, this is a little bit of a teaser, and I've just looked at my watch and it's time for our break. And so we're not going to work with this anymore today. And there won't be anything like this on the homework, because we're going to spend a little more time with this in about 3 weeks, I think, when we're getting into, maybe it'll be even next week, but when we get into defining your dependent variables. So what we're going to do is take a break, and we're going to, let me get the exact time, and then we'll come back and we're going to finish talking about correlations and then get into a little bit with regression. So we'll take a break at this time, and my clock says 1:24. Let's come back at 1:40, and that'll give me time to go get some water and use the bathroom here too. So we'll come back at 1:40. That's a little bit long. That's 15 minutes, but I am going to stay here a minute before I go, so that if any of you have questions about what we've been covering, I can answer them for you. Otherwise, I'll just stay here a few more minutes and you can stick around and we can chat if you'd like. Lisa, I'll open that, and I'd like you to submit that assignment, okay?
Okay, thank you.
Yeah, thank you for doing it. I'm going to turn my video off here, but if you speak or say something or put in the chat, I'll be here. Hello, everyone. We'll get started back up again. Just drop a reply so I know you're back.
Talia's here.
Thanks, Talia. You can drop in the chat or just check in with your voice. Thanks, Arcada.
I'm also here.
Okay, good. Evan, Titania, Sandra, Lita, Megan, glad all of you are here. Katana, Jeanette, very good. All right, so we're going to jump back into correlation, talking about correlation today. And there we go. Get my glove back on. And we're going to start on the whiteboard. I'm going to give you a little bit of way to interpret this correlational scores. So you'll recall, anyone remember the type of graph we use to display correlation?
Scatter plot.
Scatter plot. And we have variable pairs. So person one, let's see, what do we want to actually measure here? Let's actually measure level of anger with tendency toward aggression. Anger measured on a scale of 1 to 10 with a 5 in the middle. Aggression also measured on a scale of 1 to 10 with a 5 in the middle. So we're looking at tendency to anger as a personality trait and tendency toward aggression as a personality trait. And I'll just write aggression here. And person one has 2 scores. We'll have their anger score in column 1. We'll have their aggression score in column 2. Person one had a 5 on the tendency to anger and a 6 on the likelihood of using aggression. We'll plot their point right here. Person two had a 3 and a 1. We'll plot their point right here. Person 3 had a 7 and a 7. And their score will be right about here and so forth. Let's give 2 more people. Person 4 had a 6 and a 4. That will be right about there. Person 5 had a 9 and a 9. Their score is right about here. And we continued to plot points like this going forward with pairs of points, each point representing a pair of scores from each individual. And we get a cluster of points like this. We draw the line of best fit. Which is the line that is nearest to the greatest number of points. I'm approximating where it was. If the line goes in an upward direction, it is a positive relationship. That means that as one variable increases, the other increases. So we can tell on the scatter plot the direction of the relationship. Positive relationship, the line extends upward. You've all worked with this. And a negative relationship, the line extends downward. And of course, we know this has nothing to do with whether it's good or bad, only whether the 2 variables agree and go in the same direction or whether they disagree and go in opposite directions. And so the line goes downward. Now, I want to give you a little bit about the test that we use to measure this downward. So you've already worked with the 2 aspects of correlation that we measure. We measure the pen stopped working. Let me see if I can save it. All right, sorry about this, everyone. I'm relying on this technology and it's not quite working today, just like last week. I have my pen back. Sorry, everyone. It's really hard to teach correlation without a pen. I guess I'll use my finger. That's not working either. Yeah. Thanks for your patience, people. Need to get myself a couple more pens. They're kind of expensive. All right, I'm just going to try to close out the whiteboard. All right. Well, I'll try and write with the cursor maybe. Oh, I can't do that either. All right, so this is going to be tough to teach. I'm going to see if I can aim my camera up at the whiteboard that's in this classroom and continue from there. Let me see what the camera's showing. And I'll stop sharing my screen. All right, so I hope that you are able to see this. So we're talking about, I'll turn a light on in this room. Someone needs to speak if you aren't able to see it. So we're talking about the scatter plot. We had a 1 to 10 measure of anger, tendency to anger, and another measure of aggression. We had drawn a scatter plot of points like this. And we had said that we had drawn a line of best fit. It had gone in an upward direction, indicating a positive correlation. Can you see this at all? Can you see the whiteboard, or should I find a different way to do this?
I can see it.
Okay, good. I don't see it very well on my screen, so I'll hope. All right, so that's what we were doing. We talked about then two measures that we can get of this correlation. We can measure the direction. We look at the arrow, and if the arrow goes upward, it is positive. We indicate that with no sign at all or a plus sign, and it is the line going upward. we can measure a negative direction, the direction in a negative way. And that is the line goes downward. And that's always marked with a negative sign. So anytime you see no sign before a correlation, before a correlation coefficient, you can look, and if it's got no sign, it's positive. If it has a negative sign, it's negative. And it's measured in something we call the correlation coefficient. And the test is the Pearson R value. And it might look something like this. And we're going to go through some examples. So this will all make sense to you shortly. So don't get any kind of frustration at this time. It might be something like this. R equals 0.75. So in this case, we don't see a sign. The sign would be right here. It's not there. So this is a positive relationship. And it's pretty strong. And how do we know the strength of the relationship? We measure the strength of the relationship on a scale from 0 to 1. And so a 0.75 would fall about halfway through that scale. And so a 0.75 would be on the strong side. So let's draw out what that scale might look like. Here is our scale. It begins at 0, meaning a very, very weak relationship or no relationship. The strongest relationship is 1. And we call this a perfect relationship. We'll look at this in a moment. Halfway through is 0.5. And if something is 0.5, we call it a moderate relationship in psychology. If it's at about 0.8, which would be way up here, we call it a strong relationship. So our 0.75 that we posed a moment ago would have fallen right about here, pretty strong. Or if we have a 0.2 in psychology, we call it weak. And so these are sort of the thresholds in psychology. We have the threshold of 0.5 for moderate, 0.8 for strong, 0.2 for weak. And so if you get an R value that falls around one of these, you would define it as weak, moderate, or strong. If you have no, the relationship that I drew here would probably be in the moderate to strong range. And so it would fall somewhere maybe up in here, maybe even a little higher. This is a pretty decent relationship. Anger pretty strongly predicts level of aggression. Other factors might come into play, like how well the person has learned to work with their anger. If we had no relationship at all, the points might look something like this. They'd be all over the board. This person is high on anger and low on aggression. This next person is low on anger but high on aggression. It wouldn't make sense. We have points all over the place. We could theoretically draw a line, but the points would be so far away from the line that they wouldn't even mean anything to us. When we measure the strength of a relationship, what we're actually measuring is sort of how far away from the line are the points. So here's the line. And so in essence, we measure the distance of each point from this line. And we run some calculations, and that you learn in stats class. And when we get the calculations done, we come up with a score somewhere between 0 and 1. So that's what we're actually kind of thinking about when you think of the strength of a correlation. If we have a perfect correlation, that means we can perfectly predict one variable if we know the other. So every point will be right on the line of best fit. For example, if I measure your weight in pounds and your weight in kilograms, I can perfectly predict how many kilograms you weigh if I know how many pounds you weigh. It would be perfect. If you weigh 100 pounds, you weigh whatever that amount is in kilograms, your point would be right here. If you weigh 200 pounds, you weigh whatever that would be in kilograms, your weight would be here. Every point would be right on the line. So a perfect positive correlation in parentheses R equals 1 would have every point on the line and allow us to know exactly what the score on one variable would be if the other variable was known. All right, another example, a perfect positive correlation. If I knew exactly the number of homework assignments you completed perfectly, I can know exactly the points earned on homework. We can also have perfect negative relationships, and it's just as strong as a perfect positive relationship. Negative and in this case, the R value would be -1. And still, every point would be on the line, but it would be going downward. So for example, we know exactly how many weeks in the semester we've completed. So we can know exactly how many weeks remaining. So if we have completed, if there are 16 weeks in the semester and we've completed 6 of them, then we know that we have 10 left. So 6, 10. If we've completed 16 of them, we know that we have 0 left. If we've completed only 1 week, we know that we have 15 weeks left. Every point perfectly on the line. Another example. Number of correct answers on exam. And number of wrong answers. If I know how many you got right, I know exactly how many you got wrong. So that, in a nutshell, is what we talk about when we talk about correlations. We're going to go over this in a moment in some slides as well and play with these a little bit. But I want to tell you just one more thing here. Let's go back to our anger and aggression measure that we put up here before. We had a cluster that looked like this. We had said it was a relationship of about probably around 0.75 or 0.8. It was pretty strong. The points are pretty tight and close to the line. Here's our line. Now, I want to show you what happens if we have someone who is an anomaly. We have someone who's high in anger, has a lot of anger in their life. They've had a lot of harm caused to them, but they are really low in aggression. So this is someone who's maybe worked really hard with their anger management, and they have really learned some good coping skills. This person, though, is an outlier. They fall outside the normal cluster of points. But as we'll see in a moment when we look at these, if we leave this person in, which we need to do, unless we can demonstrate that they're a different population, if we leave them in, they're going to really pull this line away. So this line used to be right here, nice and in the middle, showing a nice strong correlation. Now with this one in there, we have to make the line kind of fit with that point too. And so the line is going to be something more like this, because this point really pulls it down. So now, instead of having a nice correlation that we're happy with of 0.75, we have a correlation of maybe 0.5 or 0.4 way down here. And that's because of the outlier. And so when we get to the slides, we'll talk a little more about that. And I'll write that a little bit bigger in case you can't see very well. An outlier a point that lies outside the data. So that is what I wanted to show you on the whiteboard that wasn't working. So I'm going to ask you if you have any questions on this. Put them in the chat or put them in the, or say them even better. Anyone? Let's get into the slide content then. Let's review this in the slide content. I always find it so much easier to talk about this stuff in the whiteboard because I can sort of show it as I'm going. So coming back to the slides then. I'm going to share my screen again. Okay, so this is all the stuff that I just talked about repeated. I think it's good to hear it twice. We talk about the correlation coefficient, which measures two dimensions. It measures the strength and direction. You guys got good at predicting that a little while ago, at predicting the strength and direction of the relationship when we were doing that for the variable pairs from your own work. So positive is just indicated that by that plus sign. It means those two variables get along. And as one increases, the other one increases. As one decreases, the other one decreases. And that would be an example. Hours revising, exam results. Probably a strong correlation here around 0.7 or 0.8. A negative is indicated by a negative sign. It means the direction of the points is downward. We could also call it inverse, and these two variables don't get along. As one increases, the other decreases. And that's what it might look like. More flu shots is fewer people with the flu. And don't make the mistake again of thinking negative is bad or weak and positive is good. That's a common mistake, but it's not accurate. Positive just means those two variables go together. And then this is how we quantify the relationship in terms of strength. So strength indicates how closely those points are to the line. And they range from 0 all the way up to 1. And you can see all of those values in between. See if my pen started up again. Here is our strong. Here is our moderate. And here is our weak relationship. Weak, moderate, strong. This is perfect. This is 0. Nothing going on here. And all we do is add the plus of the negative sign. If it's a negative relationship, we put a negative sign in front of it. And those are some examples. So what we're going to do now is go into an applet. And I have it ready for us. And we're going to do some guessing. It's really fun. So what we're looking at here is a scatter plot. We don't know what the variables are. It doesn't matter. And I can choose a sample size, and I'm going to choose 50. So I'm going to imagine that I'm going to get data for 50 people. And all we're going to do is it's just going to show us a scatter plot, and we're going to guess what the correlation is. So let's go ahead and look at a scatter plot. So now if you can imagine where that line of best fit would be, you can make a, let me just see. No. Okay, you can make a reasonable guess. So I would say these points are pretty far from the line. Well, first off, let me ask you this. Is this depicting a positive relationship where the line goes upward, or a negative relationship where the line of best fit would probably go downward? And I'd like you to type in your answer. Does the line go upward, positive or negative, or just say it better yet?
Positive.
Yeah, I hear Talea saying
Positive.
positive, and a couple of people agree. And I'd say positive. And how strong is the relationship? How tight are these points to the line? What would you say if we thought about that scale I showed you just a minute ago? Is it closer to 0 or closer to 1, would you say, with 1 being perfect and 0 being nothing at all?
Moderate.
Maybe moderate, you're thinking? Okay. So I'm going to throw a value out here. I'll guess on this one just to show you how we're going to do this. I'm going to guess that this one is, I think it's going to be maybe below moderate. I think maybe I would guess I'm going to say 0.3. I'm not always right on these. I didn't put a negative sign because I think it's positive. And now I'm going to check my guess. And not too bad, 0.257. So this is almost a weak relationship. So take a look at it. Now you know what a weak relationship looks like, and let's get a new sample. Let's get one that we like. Let's get this one. First, indicate whether you think it's positive or negative, and then indicate how strong you think it is. So I would like to have a couple people give a stab to this. Positive or negative? Anyone?
Positive.
All right, and who would like to give a guess at what the value would be? I see one guess, Nicole, thank you. We can do a few of these if you guys, if I get 3 guesses, I'll, all right, moderate, let's put an actual score down. I see a 0.5, a 0.4. I think you guys are giving good guesses. Anyone else want to throw a guess out here? An educated guess, 0.5, 0.4. All right, let's go split the difference and go 0.45. And 0.412, you guys are good. Let's do another one. All right, let's take this awkward one. What do we think?
Like-
So put down what your guess is. Let's get a few guesses out here. Don't forget to put positive or negative. Sometimes it's hard for me to tell what the, yeah, and weak. So put a number to it, guys, who are just giving, who aren't giving numbers. So put the actual minus sign and put a number to it. Throw some numbers on the paper here. I don't want words though, I want numbers. Minus, if it's negative, it's minus. All right, I see a minus 0.1, thinking that's really quite weak. Can I see, and I see a minus 0.2. Minus 0.1. All right, let's try that. I think might be a little stronger than that. Whoops, let's get the minus sign. 0.1. Here's the guess that I saw most commonly. Oh my gosh, you guys were better than I was. It's minus 0.028. Wow, that one I would have gotten wrong. I would have guessed probably minus 0.25. All right, let's do another one. What do we think here? Let's have a couple guesses. Donovan, you can step in too if you were able to see the screen. Okay, I see a couple of scores here. I see a 0.5, 0.6, 0.3. Anyone else? A minus 0.5. Oh, no, plus. My eyes weren't seeing that right. Okay, 0.5 seems to be the common guess here. Let's put that in and see how we did. 0.566. You guys are good. Oh, yeah. Let's try another one. Ooh, interesting. What do we think here? Let's see about 4 or 5 guesses on this one. Think whether it's positive or negative, and then how tight the points are to the line. And if they're right on the line, it's 1. Strong negative relationship would be minus 0.8. Moderate would be minus 0.5. Weak would be minus 0.2. Good, Nicole. See a couple more guesses here. Minus 0.5, minus 0.7, minus 0.4. Let's have one more. Donovan, are you here?
I'm here,
Okay.
but I can't see the screen.
Oh, you can't? Okay. Okay.
Yeah, I dialed in.
Oh, you can never see the, oh, I don't know how you're doing this without seeing the screen. All right, I would guess that it's stronger than you guys are guessing. I'd guess it's like 0.8 or 0.9 minus, I mean, minus, but let's put in minus 0.7, which is the highest I saw. And minus 0.884. So if you got this in your study, you would be very, very happy. This is a nice tight cluster of points, very close to the line. So let's do 2 more. Ew, I don't like that one. How about this one? I see a minus 0.4, minus 0.5, minus 0.4, or no, I'm sorry, I'm looking at the last one. How about this one, you guys? Plus 0.4, plus 0.5, plus 0.6. I think you guys are all in the right ballpark here. Let's put 0.5, which is the average of the 3 guesses we just got. 0.628. Lisa is the winner on that one. And let's do this last one. Well, we just had this one, didn't we? Let's do, to end up, what one should we do? Let's do that for our last one. Positive or negative. I'm seeing 0.7, 0.8, 0.5. I guess I will, anyone else want to weigh in? Katana, good, 0.6. I think the average of what I've seen so far might be around I'll just put in 0.7. And that's 0.809. Okay. So now you know what these points look like. I just want to see if we can get one with an outlier. I don't know, not seeing a super strong outlier. Oh my gosh, should we guess at this one? Look how tight those points are. Let's do this one for our last, actually. No outlier. Those points are really tight. I agree with the negative, but remember 1 is a perfect score and these are almost perfect, aren't they? It's not a perfect 1 because they'd be exactly on the line if it was perfect, but minus 0.9, minus 0.8, minus 0.88. Yeah, you guys are having good guesses. Let's try that minus 0.9. And you look at this, you guys, minus 0.992. The closest guess was the minus 1. This is an almost perfect relationship. So now you see what these look like a little bit. So we'll give you more chance to play with that, but let's get into a little bit more of our content here. So that is the idea of what we're looking for. Those are our guidelines. If we have a plus or a minus 0.8, that's considered strong, and stuff around there is strong. Moderate would be around plus or minus 0.5. Weak would be around plus or minus 0.2. And one thing to realize is that the number of subjects, which we call N, is that it's going to lead to higher correlation coefficients. So if you do your study, let's say you actually decide to do the study and you propose a correlational study, but you're only able to get data from 10 people, it's likely to be a very weak correlation. You just don't have enough participants. Usually you need to have at least 30 people to be able to trust your correlation coefficient. I wonder if we can look at an example of that. Actually, I've never really looked at it, but let's go back to that chance applet and let's change our sample size to 10 and see what a difference this makes. So here's a sample. Let's find one that might look pretty good. This one might be pretty good. We could draw a line of best fit in there. What might you guess this one is? It's positive. How close are the points to the line? And if we had a lot more points, we might guess sort of a moderate relationship of 0.5. We don't have very many points, but let's put in our guess of 0.5 and see how it looks. Oh, 0.648. I thought I was going low on the low end there. All right, let's try another one. Because typically when you get fewer numbers, you get weaker correlations than you would your correlation coefficient shows a weaker relationship. This one is going to be really, really high no matter what, probably a 0.9 or 0.8, 0.9 something, 0.972. So in any case, you can't really rely on it unless you have usually at least 30 individuals. And then the more individuals you have, the stronger it's going to be. Let's try 1,000 people. And we have something like this, which doesn't look like much, but if this looks like a 0 correlation, let's try a 0.1 and see what we actually get, 0.184. So we got a stronger correlation than the points look like. If we have something like this, we might guess it's a minus 0.5. And it's probably gonna maybe be a little higher, minus 0.533. So too many numbers will inflate your correlation coefficient. Too few numbers will reduce your correlation coefficient. So you want to be kind of careful with that. Okay, outliers we talked about before. These are number pairs that fall far outside the cluster, and they're going to distort the correlation coefficient. Another thing that'll impact it is range restriction. We'll look at an example in a minute of each of these. If the range is so low that the values cluster on the low end or the high end, you're going to have a distorted correlation coefficient, and I'll give you an example in a moment. If one of your measures is unreliable, you're going to get a bad correlation coefficient. So if you imagine that you're asking, well, let's say you're looking, you want to know if there's a relationship between the age at which infants first slept through the night and sleeping problems experienced in adulthood. So let's say you hypothesize a relationship, and the way you get your data is you ask parents, at what age did your child, and the children are now in their 20s, and you ask their parents, at what age did Jennifer, who's now 25, first sleep through the night? Now, the parent's memory is likely to be flawed. And so probably the data on that variable are going to be weak. And so you're going to get weak data on one variable, then you cannot rely on your correlation coefficient. And finally, nonlinear relationship. That's the idea that Lisa offered us earlier with the alcohol question. And if the line that best nears all the points isn't straight, then we wouldn't get a correlation coefficient. We'd have to use a different test. We wouldn't use Pearson. So let's look at all of these. So first outliers. So outliers look like in figure 1, you can see that there's a cluster of points outside the body of points. This cluster of points is going to have the effect of pulling the line of best fit toward it. And as this line of best fit gets pulled away from the body of points, then we have a much weaker correlation coefficient. Now, as a researcher, you want to have a high correlation coefficient because it means your hypothesis is supported. You can see here how we determine outliers. We can see the cluster of points, and then like the interval where we would expect points to be. And here we have this one point here that's just outside that expected interval. And so that would be considered an outlier. Now we would want to find out what's going on. So if we have these data and we know who provided the data, note that this is for a third exam score. So this class has 4 exams, the third exam score and the fourth exam score. And this person just really did poorly on that third exam, but they did really well on the final exam. Now, as long as this is legitimate, as long as the third exam legitimately measured this performance of this child, then we have to keep the data. As long as this individual is part of the regular population, we have to keep the data. But if we can learn something about the situation, like we look back into our grade book and we find out that this exam date was the first day this person came back to class after being ill for 3 weeks, then we might say, there's an extenuating circumstance. This score did not accurately measure this person's understanding of content, and then we could eliminate this outlier. But if we look at all the data and we find out everything we can, and we cannot find a legitimate reason for excluding this person, everything we can tell this person was in class, was taking the test, everything looked normal, then we can't eliminate this person, and we just have to suffer with less of a correlation than we wanted to have. Outliers are very powerful, as we've discussed. Right here, we have a data set that has an outlier. Let's imagine that it's an exam score that was produced. Let's say this person did well on the third exam and blew the final exam, got a lower score on the final exam, and it had something to do with, say, taking a new job, during the time that final exam had been given or something. For some reason, we found a legitimate reason that it wasn't an accurate measure or that this person wasn't part of the population. And so we remove that outlier. Our correlation coefficient goes from a 0.4 to a 0.7 just by removing the outlier. And so we really do try to find reasons for pulling them when we can. what kind of reasons well, first let's answer this question. So here we have two scores for individuals. Our first person, person 1, got a 10 on variable X and a 41 on variable Y. Our next person got an 8 and a 35. Next a 12 and a 46. Next a 7 and a 48. Next to 9 and a 37. Is there any pair that you can look at that doesn't fit the pattern? The 12 is the highest value in the X, but it doesn't go with the highest value in Y, but it goes with a pretty high value. The 10 is the next highest value in X, and it also goes not with the next highest value, but also with a corresponding value. The 8 or the 9 goes with the 37. That follows a pattern. The 8 goes with the 35. That follows a pattern. So we have, if we ranked them, they would all be in order. But the 7, the lowest score on the X variable goes with the highest score on the Y variable. And so this individual is the outlier. Another way to think about it, if we ranked them from lowest to highest, this would be the lowest on X. Then we would have this. Then we would have this, this, and this. And if we rank them over here, we would have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And so the fact that the 1 goes with the 5 throws us off. The rest are all in order. So outliers cause a serious reduction to the strength of the correlation, but they have to be retained if the individual with the outlying score is part of the population of interest. There's nothing detectable that suggests something was amiss. And we can remove it if it's not part of the population of interest. So if there's an extenuating circumstance, like a child took the test when she was ill, or if aggression is the dependent variable, and one person took the measure just as a text came in from that his girlfriend was breaking up with him, and he just really had high scores on that aggression measure, but it didn't relate to the stimulus, it related to this message from his girlfriend. Or if there's a different population, that's essentially what this amounts to, is creating a different population. If the variable was a test score in a statistics class, and we find out that one person who took the test was a statistics professor who was visiting the class that day, well, that would be a bad measure. That wouldn't be part of the population of students that we were interested in. Or if the variable is aggression and it's measured in terms of how much hot spice someone puts in the drink to give to an opponent, which is done in studies. But one participant was Thai, and they're used to very spicy foods. And so for her, putting a lot of spice in that drink was not an act of aggression, but it was what she herself would have wanted. So then we would say this person is from a different population. So we want to find out about our individuals in case something like this comes up. Questions about outliers? Okay. Well, range restriction means that we didn't measure one of our variables very well. And so if we were trying to look at this relationship between test scores and hours spent studying, we would actually, our data might be truncated on the lower end if we assumed a low end of 40 on these two scales. And in that case, we wouldn't have a strong correlation if we cut off our data. And so we would have a 0.91 over here with all the data, but only a 0.72 if we truncate the data. And the last thing is this that I was talking about earlier with Lisa. Sometimes the points don't go in a straight line. If they go in a straight line, linear. If they don't go in a straight line, nonlinear. So let's write that up here. A straight line is linear. And we use that Pearson R value. If we look at our points and they're showing something like this, and we can see that this cluster of points would have a curving line, then we call it a curvilinear relationship. So a curved line equals curvilinear. And that equals a different statistical test. It's called the Spearman's row. I don't think this is on the test at all. But in essence, instead of using the raw values of the points, we'd be ranking each of these points and comparing the ranks. And we'd be expecting that people who ranked in the high level we'd expect the two variable ranks to be similar, so that the highest are going with the highest and the lowest are going with the lowest. Here's an example of it: level of anxiety and exam score. So ideally, we want an optimal level of arousal, which is in the medium range. So it's not necessarily interpreted as anxiety, it's interpreted as arousal, but your heart rate, the more aroused you are or the more anxious you are, the higher your heart rate goes, the more jittery you might be and things like that. So there's an optimal level for all of us. And if we have too much anxiety, we drink way too much coffee, or we're so nervous we're almost shaking, our exam score will decrease. So if our anxiety is too high, we get a lower exam score. But on the other hand, if our anxiety is too low, we also get a lower exam score. We're sluggish, we're not fully alert, and we get our optimal exam score, our highest exam score, when our arousal is at our optimal or this middle range. That's a curvilinear relationship. Another example, hours of sleep per night and depression. And so depression, on the x-axis, we have the number of hours of sleep. So let's figure 10 up here and 0 down here. So if you get no sleep at all, let's just put, your 8 right in the middle there or something like that. And then maybe let's put 12 up here. So if your sleep is too low, your depression is going to be high. You don't get enough sleep. If your sleep is too much, you're sleeping 12, 14 hours a day, your depression is high. But if you're getting about the right amount of sleep, your depression will be low. Now, that doesn't mean sleep causes depression. Some people think that depression causes the sleep deprivation. Some people think that sleep deprivation causes depression. It's still a relationship that could go in either direction, but it's curvilinear. And one of the things with alcohol is also thought to be curvilinear, and that is, let's say, social anxiety. And some people do have a drink for social anxiety, and it relaxes them and they feel better and they feel more socially engaged. But so no drinks might have higher anxiety. Then a person has a drink and their anxiety might get lower. But then if they have another drink or a couple more drinks, then their social skill might get bad again. They might start to lose it. They'll start to slur and make poor decisions. And so, and I used social anxiety. I should have used social skill. So with no drinks, their social skill might be low. After they have a drink, it might be a little bit better. But if they continue to have drinks, then it's going to get low again. So those are curvilinear relationships. So I think that is about what I have for you here. What I can do, except that we're out of time, I think. Let's see what the exact time is. So this is an example of a headline that I'm going to give you in your homework this week. You're going to be doing just the things we did in class in your practice assignment. It'll be similar to last week's, where I'll give you an example and then you'll explain it. And you'll be cleaning up some variable names. You'll be putting a definition and operationalizing a variable or two, and you'll be offering these 3 alternate explanations and just a couple more things. And that's what you'll be doing to close out this chapter. And I want to remind you that everything that's due up to this point This is the first half of the semester and everything is due on Monday, and I have to turn my grades in next week, Tuesday, for midterm. So do get your work in, including this last assignment. And if you're missing something and you'd like a chance to do it, you could submit a late pass. Or if one person, I was to open an assignment for her that I said I would and I didn't, so then let me know about that. But do keep an eye on everything this week because it's midterm week. And other than that, I think we're going to wrap up. My throat is feeling dry from forgetting my water. And so that's about it from me for today. So is there anything else I can answer for you before we sign off? All right, everyone, I'll say goodbye to you in the text and I'll close out our meeting for today. Glad you were here.
I have a question.
Sure.
If we do have like some confusion or anything for like our assignment, is it okay if we text you or do we email you or?
I mean, usually the good thing about email is that I'm at my computer usually when I get it, and then I can usually give you better help. Usually if I'm looking at my phone, then I'm not at my computer. So I think that probably is the best way. But if somehow you've messaged me and I haven't gotten it and you need to have that responded to, then you might give a text because that one dings a bell for me. So either way, though, you have both sets of information. So use your best judgment.
Okay.
Thanks, Titania. Next time. So yeah, Naomi, any questions? Naomi, question? Naomi?